the Q&A. As always, just wanted to remind everyone of the format that we have for our different sessions. There's this one that we have weekly. We have Python development office hours and Java development office hours if you're specifically wanting to help with some of the development work and be able to dive into that further. And then we also have office hours dedicated for our APAC team. What I do want to remind everyone of before we go over to open Q&A is we have an ask to the community. We have our upcoming build session, and during the session, we want to be able to feature community members like yourself in a brief video where you'll share your name, what you like about Semantic Kernel, how you've been using it, and your top 3 words. And so we'd love to be able to get you on stage with us at build, even if you're not there in person. And so I've gone ahead and linked in chat to the form, and we'd love to be able to have you fill it out. And then if you are interested, we would reach out to you for some next steps to be able to give the information that we need for video, and then also some legal things as well. So with that, I'm going to go and turn it over to questions that individuals have.
I guess while we're waiting on questions, there's been a lot of recent releases in the past couple weeks. And Sophia's been doing a great job of blogging those out. So maybe we take a few minutes kind of just going over those real quick so that folks are aware of the new functionality, and then we can jump to questions.
Sure, I stop sharing if you want to share out, Matthew.
Okay. Okay, so since we skipped last week, we can see that there's a ton of stuff that's been released, including the recordings of the office hours. So that's a great way of catching back up. Probably the ones that I am most excited about are the API manifests and filters. So if we take a look at those. So with Semantic Kernel, one of the main values is being able to take in native code or APIs, bringing them into the kernel so that the kernel can then provide them to the LLM service. And that's great. You can build native functions. You can also take an Open API manifest and bring it in. But the challenge with Open API manifest is typically you have a service that has dozens of APIs. They can be a bit unwieldy. It could be too much for the LLM. And so previously, what you would have to do is either create a new service that had a minimal set of API to give to the LLM. Maybe you would have to wrap everything in native functions to make it a little bit simpler. You had to write additional code in order to actually have an API that the AI could reason over easily. With the new API manifest feature, you can actually simplify the Open API so that it only includes the routes that you care or want, right? So we can see kind of what an API manifest file looks like. It's just JSON, and you can see that it's only showing, in this case, these 2 different routes, so that you aren't sending, in this case, all of the routes of Microsoft Graph, only the routes that are relevant for your LLM application. So if that's something that interests you, I highly recommend checking out this blog article that kind of walks through how to use it. And the other thing that I'd recommend checking out is the kind of docs around API manifest. Is something that's being driven from Microsoft, but we're hoping this is a schema that is used across the industry. So you can check this out and definitely give us feedback. We can route it to the API manifest team. If there's any questions about this, feel free to leave it in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. The other feature, this has been a long time coming, and I think it's frankly huge, is filters. So if you've been with Semantic Kernel for a while now, you've probably seen our evolution of starting with hooks. We then moved to filters to be more idiomatic with .NET. And with this third kind of implementation. This is kind of what we're going to eventually make non-experimental. We've made it even more idiomatic with .NET, and it enables some really important features that customers have asked for in the past. So if you've used the previous version of filters, this is what it looked like in the past. You extended a class called iFunctionFilter or iPromptFilter, and we gave you two different methods that you could use in order to have logic that happens before a function is called or before a prompt is rendered, and logic that happens after the function is invoked or after it's been rendered. And this was pretty good. It allows you to do things like change the arguments or change the results. But where there were challenges were when an error happened or when you have to cancel a function. Maybe it wasn't approved by a user. This pattern did not scale to those different situations. And so what we've done is we've introduced some new filters or updated filters that instead of having these two different methods, we've combined them. Here you can see for function invocation, there's just one method now. And inside of that method, we of course give you the context just like before. But what's new is we also provide a delegate that allows you to call the next filter, and eventually the actual function itself. And so if you wanted to replicate the behavior of the previous implementation, you would write your method. You could write all of the pre-filter logic before the delegate is called. And then after the delegate is called, you can perform some additional actions. And what this allows you to do, what's really powerful, is it gives you a little bit more control over error handling and canceling of your logic. So here you can see we've wrapped the delegate in a try-catch block statement so that if something does go wrong, you can of course log, hey, something went wrong, what have you. But what's really important for LLMs is providing a really helpful error message back to the LLM to say, hey, this is what went wrong. This is how you fix it. And so what you can see here is we're overriding the result that's being sent back to the LLM with another custom message. So this is something that a lot of folks have been asking for. This will help you build applications that the LLM can course correct if necessary, if any errors do happen. We have some examples around streaming. That's also new. We didn't have streaming support before. And then, of course, this is also true for prompt rendering. Now, the last thing I want to share with all of you is we then also added a brand new filter for automatic function invocation. I have been getting a lot of questions of how is this different than just the function invocation filter. So if you want to think about the process of when you're having an AI call functions. So you send a request, you send the list of functions, say, hey, AI, this is the user's request. Go ahead and call the number of functions required in order to satisfy the user's request. When that happens, Semantic Kernel starts this really big loop. And in this loop, the AI decides, oh, I want to call function A. I then want to call function B, and I call function C. And for you to control that loop, for you to be able to break out of it, to change its behavior, we needed to introduce a new filter. Because a lot of times, you may also invoke a function outside of that loop, right? So the context is different for the automatic function invocation filter and the standard function filter. In the automatic function filter, you can see that in the context, you have a little bit more information. For example, where are we in the loop? Right? Are we at the first function? Are we at the second function? Are we at the third one? This gives you control to say, hey, after 10 loops or 10 iterations, cancel. The AI clearly doesn't know how to solve it, right? So that gives you that control. It also gives you control to terminate the loop. We found this was really helpful. A lot of customers, what they wanted to do is make sure that the AI didn't generate a message at the very end for RAG scenarios. You might imagine a scenario where the AI is being asked legal questions. In those situations, you don't want the AI to actually generate anything. You want to use the verbatims of the legal information that they retrieve using RAG, right? And so in that scenario, what you would do is if the AI got back information, some legal information that you want to provide verbatims from, all you would have to do is set the terminate to true. The AI will not generate a response, and you instead can generate that response with that data. Okay? So really, really powerful stuff. We'd like to get this non-experimental as soon as possible. So if you have any feedback, please, please, please share it with us. We kind of have a rule on the team. We need to at least have like 3 implementations of an interface and at least a few customers, or 3 customers that are using it in production. So if you can give us that signal, then we can go ahead and make this non-experimental. Okay. So if there's any questions on the new filters, again, feel free to leave a comment in the chat or raise your hand. Oh, look, Steve is excited about this. Just some other scenarios to think about when using filters. So I showed how you can respond to error messages. I showed how you can escape that loop if you don't want the AI to generate a message. We've also heard customers wanting to use this for semantic caching. So you can imagine in the prompt rendering filter, you render the prompt and you detect that it's similar to a prompt, a question that has already been asked before. So instead of sending the prompt to the LLM, you can just serve up the cached result. Another scenario that we've seen is approvals. Hey, before a function is called, we're going to ask the user to approve the function before it actually happens. So in Microsoft 365 Copilot, they actually use bits and pieces of semantic kernel. They want to use that part of semantic kernel in order to get approvals from users. And then the last one is around memory. So if you have a long-running chat that doesn't fit in context, you may need to enrich your prompt with additional data that have been previously in the chat. You can use filters for that as well. Okay. And the last thing I want to call out, we don't have a blog for it out quite yet, but our agent framework is now merged into main, and we have NuGet packages for it. So if we go to our GitHub and we go into .NET and take a look at the source, we now have an agents folder that you can check out. But probably more helpful are all the samples that we have around agents. So we have this really helpful getting started with agents folder. Getting started learning about agents is as simple as following each of these samples step by step. In my very biased opinion, I think some of our agent abstractions actually simplifies your code even further, because all you have to do is create this new agent, and you can invoke it with new questions, and you don't have to deal with things like the iChat completion service. All of that is kind of abstracted away from you using the agent. This is also a really great way of using the assistance API with semantic kernel. Because this is brand freaking new, there are a few bugs that we're identifying. So on Monday, we have internal bug bash. We've identified a few of them that we're creating issues for. Please give it a whirl. Please give us feedback. We're not completely locked into the interfaces yet. So if you can give us any feedback, that'd be appreciated. Okay. And that's it from my side in terms of updates. So was there anything else you think I missed?
No, I think you covered it all. Sounds really good. I see a couple of questions in chat. Tim, do you mind coming off of mute around your agent question? If not, I'm happy to read it out. Okay, yeah, I can definitely read it out for you, Tim. So there's a discussion that Tim was having with one of the team members and wanted to double check on how to be able to raise the issue. Should he fork and raise a PR to contribute and just wanted to double check on the process. So I think this is a really good time to just go over with everyone if there are things that you'd like to contribute, things that you're seeing of how to go through that process.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and link to our contributing documentation. But you basically describe the general process. So you'll create a new issue. Um, this allows us to make sure that you don't waste time. That's the most important thing for us. So if you create an issue and say, hey, this is what I found, I would love to fix something, improve something, whatever it might be, right? Um, we will thumbs up and go, yeah, that's a great idea. We love it. And at that point, you can go ahead and create a PR and get that submitted. I believe our Python engineer is back either today or tomorrow. So they'll be able to start reviewing those list of issues. Great question.
Perfect. If Tim, if there are any more questions on that, let us know. There was one other question that Tim had in chat. Is the new agent feature not decoupled from the assistance API, or is it?
It is. So that was one of our big reasons for making some updates to our agent framework, because the previous package we had was extremely tied to the assistance API. So just to see what this looks like in our code. So if we look at agents, we currently have two implementations of our what we're calling the kernel agent. One is what we're calling the chat completion agent. And what that is behind the scenes, it uses any chat completion service that you have, whether it's OpenAI, Mistral, Llama, etc., to create an agent for you and for you to be able to converse with it. And we also have implemented a kernel agent that uses the OpenAI Assistance API, right? And one of the hardest parts, one of the things I like most about our agent framework is traditionally having these two different types of agents talk to each other is fairly difficult because one uses just a standard chat history object that you send over to a REST service. The Assistant API, they have this thread concept that lives in the cloud. What we've done with our Assistance API is we've abstracted away those differences so that when you have two agents working together in the same group chat, all you have to worry about is providing the new messages from the user. And we will do the hard work of translating that information to those respective ways of modeling chat messages so that all the agents understand what's being said in their own kind of native way. Great question. Great question. And in terms of samples, I think I saw a question there. I'm going to go ahead and link to our Getting Started with Agents. Link it in the chat. This is for Steve. If you take a look at step 3, I believe is where we start introducing multiple agents to a single chat. And so we can take a look at, we create two different agents, one that is a reviewer, one that's a writer. And creating a group chat with these two agents together is as simple as creating a new agent group chat. You can see we are adding those two agents to that chat. And there's some execution settings that you can define. Probably the most important is when is the chat over? Because you don't want these agents just to talk forever, right? And so in this case, they're adding a strategy that allows you to terminate the chat once the agent reviewer has approved that the content written by the writer is good enough. Okay? So definitely check this out. This is, again, very highly inspired and modeled off of AutoGen. They use many of the same patterns of having separate agents, combining them to a chat, and having a termination strategy. I get this question all the time. Hey, what is the plans in .NET to align AutoGen and .NET? The AutoGen.NET team, I'm sorry, align AutoGen and Semantic Kernel. The AutoGen team was waiting on a few gaps to be addressed with Semantic Kernel. Those have now been addressed. And so we're meeting with them tomorrow to start figuring out how do we start reconciling and how do we have them eventually take a dependency on Semantic Kernel. If you haven't taken a look at AutoGen.net, it did just release yesterday. So that's also another agent framework that you can take a look at. And these two things should start looking the same over the next several weeks and months. Right.
Great. I'm seeing a couple of questions in chat. Colton, would you want to come off of mute? I'm happy to read it off now.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was just curious, what is the significance of decoupling the assistant's OpenAI API for someone who's not aware?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Assistants API is pretty great because it does so much work for you. It manages your chat history. It even comes with like fancy, they call them tools, we call them plugins for like the code interpreter and retrieving of files. So if you can use it, I would actually recommend you to use the Assistants API because it just keeps getting better. And like I said, it does so much work for you. There are cases, there are scenarios, however, where it doesn't make sense to use the Assistants API. I think Tim mentioned one of them. Your enterprise may not allow it, right? Why would they not allow it? Well, maybe your chat history is really sensitive and you don't feel comfortable with Azure, OpenAI, or OpenAI managing that in their own cloud, right? Maybe you have some guarantees to customers where you want to manage the chat history yourself for compliance reasons. Another reason, there are some limitations to the Assistants API. We hope and pray that a lot of these limitations go away. But one of them is they only allow you to add certain types of messages to their chat history, their threads, which may or may not be limiting to you. So depending on if there are reasons why you can't use it, or if there's features that you need that aren't supported by the Assistants API, that might move you into a world where you need to create your own agent, right? The value of our agent framework is we've done the hard work already for you. We've basically created an agent that looks, breathes, smells, acts exactly like an Assistants API agent. But instead of using the Assistants API, it uses the underlying foundational model. And I think that's the last reason why you might not want to use the Assistants API. If you wanted to build an agent with another model, maybe one that's cheaper, like a local llama model, or maybe you want to try out Google Gemini. Those obviously are not going to work with the Assistants API because those are tied to OpenAI models. And so you might want to have a non-assistant API agent to try out those different models.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Perfect. There's a couple other ones in chat. One of them is following up on a previous question. Has anyone seen an example of a simple chatbot using SK in the new Blazor web app template that was released at the end of 2023?
Ooh, I thought someone was working on it. Sophia, you wouldn't happen to.
That doesn't ring a bell. When I was looking at this one, doing some quick research, I wasn't able to find anything.
I wanted to say someone's working on it. We might have to follow up with y'all. Laser sample chat. I do know that as we approach build, the .NET team has been updating and rewriting a lot of their samples to use Semantic Kernel. Sophia's been kind of leading the charge on that. I thought there was one around Blazor, but we'll probably have to follow up to make sure.
Great, and I'll move on to the next question. Tim had disconnected and he just wanted to follow up. Right now, he can't use the Assistance API with the enterprise that he's with, and so he can use the SK framework without it. Then he just wants to clarify that.
Yes, that's right.
Perfect. And then there's another question in chat. Are there any integrations available between SK and Azure Databricks, specifically the SQL NLP aspect of Databricks SQL?
There's nothing out of the box. We have helped some customers build like a custom plugin that talks to Databricks. I think as part of those chats, we learned that there is a special model that, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Databricks has created a model that um, specializes in writing Databricks queries. If you are able to deploy that,
DBRX they created. DBRX,
okay.
Databricks created.
Yes. So if that's a model that you want to use, and if you deploy it, is this I can't remember. Can you deploy the model on like Hugging Face? Or do you
No,
remember how
currently,
to
see, I mean, we wanted to use only Azure OpenAI. So directly there is a availability of, let's say, notebook is directly available on Azure Databricks, right? And then I can use Python, and then I can kind of the simple plain vanilla code, right? The way, I mean, simply used to connect Azure OpenAI interfaces, right? As a API only, right? But yeah, I'm not seeing any example. Okay, can we use introduce SK and maybe some flavor of C sharp, right? Rather than Python.
Yeah, so you will likely have the model write Python, because it's just better at writing Python. You're asking though, from a developer standpoint, can you do this
Yeah,
in
correct. Yeah,
.NET?
right. Yeah.
It is possible. We've seen customers do it. I do think some of the things that we're releasing in build will make this easier. Unfortunately, I can't speak to some of these because they're features built by other feature teams and that hasn't gone public yet. So I'd say if you if you wait less than a month, we'll have some solutions that I believe will help with the Databricks scenarios.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Great. And with that, we're going to turn over to other questions. I'm not seeing anything else in chat. There was just a question around Blazor, which I think we've gone ahead and addressed. So I'd really invite people to come off of mute or feel free to keep putting questions you have in chat as well.
We have one sample previously around SK, I mean, old version of SK, right? I think that was deprecated. So is there any something new development to showcase the real world kind of example around SKs and then whatever coming new stuff, right? Previously, we have one project, right? So which I think SK deprecated.
There's a couple things. So one of the more
previously we have chat copilot app, right?
Yeah, based on customer feedback, we did actually update that to a post V1 release. So it is on the stable release of Semantic Kernel. So if you were using Chat Copilot before, you should be able to take an update and kind of see how that works. If you are new though, I wouldn't say I'd recommend jumping into that sample to learn how to best use Semantic Kernel as a service because it is on the more complicated side. The one I want to share with y'all is called Semantic Kernel in a Box. It's a GitHub repo, and it's a little bit more simpler. It's a little bit easier to grok. I'll share that here. Probably my favorite bit is it shows how to integrate Semantic Kernel with Bot Framework. If you're not familiar with Bot Framework, it's like the way to add an AI agent into Microsoft Teams. You can also deploy with Bot Framework to WhatsApp, your own website. There's like a dozen different channels that you can deploy your agent with. And so it's just a really great way of getting a UI really, really fast on top of your agent built with Semantic Kernel.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Great. And I'm seeing a question in chat from Steve. Would you mind coming off of mute? I'm happy to read it off too.
Yeah, hi guys. I was just wondering, just general best practices about chat history, as far as like how large of a chat history are folks using, and what's kind of been best practices. I've seen a lot of different variances out there and different blogs and feedback from developers, and my own experience has been, LLMs get a little bit confused with too much, especially when the user's switching context, right, from this subject to that subject. So it's just kind of, you want to pick your brain, Matt, or others on the call, is just see what do people find it's working pretty good for them.
Yeah. So there has been research on how do you have a really long running chat where the user can like switch contexts. A lot of that involves like caching chats into a vector DB and retrieving them when the context changes. I would say that's fairly complex. And if I were y'all, I would frankly wait until the research has kind of settled and it's kind of natively baked into multiple frameworks and SDKs. What I think a lot of folks have been doing to address this problem, I would say even including OpenAI with ChatGPT, is creating UIs, experiences that encourages users to not put everything in a single long writing thread, right? Encouraging customers and users to, as they have a different topic that they want to talk about, creating a new thread that is kind of clean that they can start with and then they can start talking to the agent with, right? So probably not the answer that you're looking for, but I do think the user experience can best match the current capabilities of the LLMs and how they reason over chat history with how users want to use it. So that you kind of avoid the worst case scenarios where the LM does get confused with a really long chat where the topic keeps changing over and over again.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. And I guess there's another question around memory. This will probably be a post-build thing, but we are fairly excited about combining both our filters with kind of the updated memory abstractions to kind of start seeing if we can address this long-running chat with multiple different topics. So I would say like maybe in the summertime, expect some samples from Semantic Kernel and how we would try to tackle this. And then we'll have to see from customers if this actually works in first-party teams within Microsoft to see if that pattern actually holds for production scenarios.
Great. And I'll go for it, Matthew.
I was going to ask you if there's any more questions.
No, I'm not seeing more questions. There was just a link back to Blazor example. Thanks for sharing that out as well in chat. I'm not seeing any other questions, but would love to hear from folks. Oh, perfect. Hey, Luis.
Or Jose.
Great. I see a hand to Jose. Do you want to go and come off of mute?
Yes, I'm trying to connect the camera. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I mentioned in the chat that at the moment, Azure, OpenAI, and OpenAI support function calling, but there's not that many models that support it, right? So I know Mixtral may support it. I'm not sure. But what about others? And in case others don't support it, what are the plans?
Yeah, so as of like, I don't know, last month or a couple of weeks, a lot of models now are supporting function calling. So you mentioned Mistral. Gemini also supports function calling. You obviously have the OpenAI models I can't remember. Does anyone know if Claude supports function calling yet? I'm just going to do a quick Google.
Yeah, it does. Yep.
It does. Okay, so Claude supports it. So basically, all of the models from the top model providers, I guess for lack of a better term, are supporting function calling. Probably the biggest exception is Llama. Actually, I don't know. Does anyone know if Llama 3 supports function calling yet? Not supported. Okay. So Llama 3 still doesn't support function calling, but if you are interested in using Llama or a local model, there are versions of Llama on Hugging Face that do support function calling. So we are seeing this as kind of an industry-wide standard that is being developed. So I feel pretty confident that our kind of early bet to kind of bear hug function calling is proving out to be the right one because the rest of the industry is following. Roger,
Excellent.
I see you came off video. Do you have anything else to add?
All good from here?
Yep.
Great. I see we have another hand up. Rahil, do you want to go and come off of mute?
Hiya. Hey, Matt. Just going back to the AutoGen sort of story. I'm following that quite closely because we're looking at experimenting. We're building different sort of apps, looking at Semantic Kernel, looking at AutoGen, and obviously you just showed us what's happening with being able to build agents. Is there a way? I mean, what's the best way to sort of understand how that is progressing? You said there are things happening in the next few weeks. There's certain gaps that have been addressed by Semantic Kernel now. What's the best way to stay aligned with what's happening, where that's going, what the end game is for that, do you think?
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, I'm meeting with the folks that are developing the AutoGen.NET library tomorrow. One of the things I'll want to be able to do with that is create some issues on the AutoGen backlog. I think that will probably be the best way of keeping track of kind of the progress of that work. In terms of the strategy, our initial goal, which we believe is really important for the .NET side, is at least align on the most fundamental abstractions, which in the LLM space is like, what is a message? What is a chat history? What is a function? So those are the first pieces that we want to drive alignment on between AutoGen.NET and Semantic Kernel. And then depending on how well that progresses, we would then slowly go up the stack. My dream scenario is both use the exact same agent interface, right? They already look fairly similar. But obviously, the devil's in the details, right? So we might find some things just don't frankly work in the patterns established by AutoGen, and there might be at some point as we go up the stack where it just doesn't make sense. But that's the goal. You should start seeing issues being created in the AutoGen library that show us trying to take a dependency on Semantic Kernel. And like I said, that'll be the best place to keep track of that effort.
Cool. Thank you.
And then I guess if we take a further step back, like how do we imagine these two different projects being rationalized? So inside of Semantic Kernel, I'm starting to create a principle within the team of having no prompts, no custom prompts, or no manipulation of your prompts. Because we were hearing a lot of feedback from people that were leaving LangChain that they had a hard time debugging or knowing what was going on because there were so many manipulations to the prompts, or they had like custom prompts that didn't scale or work across all model types, right? So we're trying to take a hands-off approach to that. But it's helpful to have other SDKs or samples that do have prompts enabled so that you can kind of see how it actually works end to end, right? And so the story I'm imagining is Semantic Kernel is going to provide those core abstractions. And the value of having something like AutoGen.NET is it can provide kind of a more opinionated way of using those abstractions with its own prompts so that you can kind of see how do these multi-agent interactions actually work.
Cool. Makes sense.
Cool.
Great. Thanks for the questions. Others who want to come off of mute?
There was a question by Giannis that I don't think I fully answered, which was what do we kind of expect in terms of memory? This is something that'll probably slip a little past build, but I can kind of share what the latest progress is at. We are updating our memory abstractions. I think I've mentioned that previously. If you want to use kernel memory, you can. It is more of a research project, so it doesn't get the same level of support from Semantic Kernel, but we are taking some of those patterns and bringing them back in as we update the memory abstractions. As we're working with the team, though, we are trying to figure out how does Semantic Kernel best play in the memory space? And because of we've been specializing in building agents, building things that can do like automatic function calling, that can do these real-time behaviors. What we are going to be prioritizing first are the scenarios that allow real-time usage of memory. And so what this means is we're going to be focusing on scenarios like semantic caching, long-running memory, things of that nature, right? And real-time searching of data so that the AI can perform RAG. What we are going to be focusing on less is those offline processes that allow you to ingest maybe hundreds of documents, create embeddings for them, and put them in a vector DB. We find that for those types of scenarios, there's already a ton of SDKs like Llama Index that do this much better than if we spent months and months trying to work on it. So we'll be providing guidance that if you want to use offline ingestion of data, offline insertion of records into a vector DB, we'll recommend some of these other SDKs, and then you can use our new memory abstractions to retrieve information from those SDKs so they can give them to your agents. Are there any other questions?
There is a question chat from Jose. Jose, feel free to come off of mute as well. The question is around the plans for more advanced examples with agent workflow and what is the plan in the future. So yeah, Jose, feel free to elaborate further. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Sophia. Hi, Matt, and hi, Roger, before I didn't greet you. So good to see you. So I've been looking quite interestingly at the samples the last 3 days. I think it was like 1 day and a half that you released all that you are presenting today, which is quite cool. One of the things I usually present is a critic, creator, or author workflow. So that's usually a aha moment when you see what they are able to do in a loop that usually involves humans, right? And for writing is one thing, but the other is for coding. And I've been looking for examples, haven't been finding too much examples. I don't know if you have that in mind to implement an agent workflow for coding, right? That's one thing is my wish. Either I like to do it, or if there is some inspiration, I would like to play with that. And the other is if we have something that writes some text for an event, from a blog post, for whatever, is there any example that uses, for example, the conversable agent from AutoGen that is able to go back to the user, hey, I did that, I took this decision, do you agree with that, or how would you like me to shape it? That would be amazing to have these two examples.
Yeah. So I'm going to split the answer into 2 parts. So one is just generally, are there going to be more samples with our agent framework for those cases and many more, right? Now that we have our initial agent framework, one of the goals of the team is to start recreating many of the samples that are in AutoGen, mostly as kind of a test for ourselves to make sure that the abstractions that we've created are flexible enough so that if AutoGen.net does take a dependency on them, it works, right? So that's the answer to the first question. In terms of the specific samples, it should be fairly easy to create the second one. So I'll work with the team and see if we can get that added. For the first one, We have traditionally shied away from agents that can write code and execute it locally because we were afraid of putting something in the semantic kernel repo that's kind of branded as enterprise ready that could theoretically have the LLM write some code that escapes the box and does evil bad things, right? For Microsoft Build, we are hoping to have a solution for this that is using something another team is building. Which I can't share too much about. So I would say wait a few more weeks, and we should be able to provide some samples of agents actually writing code for some of these scenarios.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. I see another hand. Pradeep, do you want to go and come off of mute?
Yeah, hi. So I just started looking at the examples you have for agent. See, a lot of these examples, all the agents are sort of instantiated sort of in a single distributed process, right? And the way at least we are envisioning is the like a central agent orchestrator, and the agents actually could be developed by multiple teams, and these could be running in separate distributed processes. So do you see the current agent framework, semantic kernel agent framework sort of supporting such a model, or do you sort of envision all of them have to be sort of instantiated in a single?
Yeah. So the way we've implemented this is we have a single abstraction for what is an agent. I think it's called like kernel agent or something to that effect. And like I said, we have two implementation right now, which is like chat completion and the assistance API. I do think if there's not already an issue for it, we should create one. There'll probably be a third one, which is, talk to an agent that is using like an API. And that would allow you to have this more distributed kind of approach where each agent is its own microservice. It has its own kind of API interface so that you can kind of wire these things up together. That's sort of kind of like what the assistance API implementation already is. So we still need to figure out like what's the best approach. Either it's creating a new implementation of agent or working with customers to build their own agents and exposing it using the exact same API as the assistance API. Over the next several weeks, months, we'll figure out kind of what the best approach is, but I completely agree. Long term, we need to support this distributed approach where all these agents can be their own services and talk to each other.
Okay, and would we have some sort of flexibility in sort of disambiguating the question and forwarding it to the correct appropriate agent, right? So let's say each agent is maybe specializing in a particular product domain, for example. So I may wish to use a combination of RAG and classification to make that disambiguation. Would you support that in the framework?
Yeah. So the way the framework, let's see if I can pull up my screen again. Okay, show our screen. So in the agent framework, I shared briefly this termination strategy. Okay, so I showed in step 3 this concept of a termination strategy, which is basically how do we know that the chat is over? What you're describing is how do we know which agent to actually speak to actually do something? And so the other kind of nod that you can play around with is what we call the selection strategy. In this sample, we're showing how you can use any prompt as kind of a way to tell the chat which agent should speak next. And so that's where you would put your RAG or classification or whatever logic it might be for you to decide which agent to talk next.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Great. So and in chat, I am seeing a question around the high-level SK flow and if it's changed since the LinkedIn Learning course that was out in March of 2023 was launched. And so there's some images in the chat that talk through the process of asking the kernel. They have some older references, but Matthew, I'll let you elaborate further, but there are some updates Skills is one thing that's in the image that has been rebranded, and others as well.
Wow, this takes me back. I'm looking at this now. It's probably not how I would describe it today, but I don't think this is inherently wrong. Yeah, you start with an ask. Today I would say, hey, this is a chat history object of an entire conversation. It goes to the kernel or your chat completion service, and then it reasons over it and actually performs some automation on top of it. Instead of using like an out-of-the-box planner, you might use automatic function calling to do this loop where the function calling could decide, oh, I need to call as Sophia mentioned, a plugin or a function, right? Oh, I need to call a function that retrieves memories, or oh, I need to call a function that performs additional AI capabilities, right? So all of this is there, just different terminology, right? Instead of a planner, we're using function calling. Instead of skills, it's basically all of these things are treated as plugins now. And then that information, right, gets fed back into that chat history object so that the AI knows, oh, when I called these memories, when I grabbed this function, these are the results back. What should I do next? It's informed, and it can repeat the step to call another function until the answer is returned back to the user. The one piece that might, I'd say, like, doesn't necessarily exist in semantic kernel anymore is this pipeline feature. This is similar to like chains and lane chain. What we found when we worked with enterprise customers, especially those that are used to writing like .NET code or Java code, they didn't want some additional kind of language that they have to learn and actually kind of pipe things together. They just wanted to use standard .NET code, right, to pass variables around or what have you. So this is the one piece that's probably gone, but everything else definitely makes sense with today's semantic kernel, with a few changes to names.
A quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
So thanks for that. You actually updated what I was thinking, because so I saw this diagram a while back, but I've been going through example after example, including the latest the learning path you guys have out. And this does make sense still with the changes you outlined. I was going to ask about memories though, because you mentioned they're going to stick around for a little bit. But even if things change, like if I were to get used to working with that as a slot, right, I could still create like demos or proof of concepts that perhaps I would swap out memories from that slot, replace it with what you were talking about as the newer abstractions you guys might have in front of alternatives to what's currently semantic kernel. But there's no reason to not follow this pattern because it'll probably still be implementable with those new abstractions. Would you say that's correct?
That's correct. If you're doing presentations or you're talking to other customers, one thing I've learned as I kind of speak about these things is I've noticed a lot of people get tripped up with memories. It's like, oh, what is this new term? Oh, it's like a brain. I have to think about like how all this information like flows in and out of it. What I have found more helpful is calling this like a search engine, right? It's the same thing, right? Like you have some sort of query, and instead of like a memory, you have search results coming back that the AI is then able to use to inform itself and then continue the cycle, right? And when you say, oh, you're creating a plugin that's talking to a search engine, maybe it's one that already exists like Google or Bing. Maybe it's a custom one that you have to build using a vector DB. But that terminology I found, especially in the enterprise space, just goes down a little bit easier than introducing a brand new concept like memory.
So what do you think about this? I was thinking about memories like this. It's a way to have your private data available to be sent as part of the prompt, but without having to send all of it, right? So like the memories would be running a query on potentially a large amount of your data, right? It's not in the LLM, it's not on the internet, but only including a very small amount of it, the relevant amount. Like that's the kind of thing I put in my mental model where memories go, like, because there's there's the LLM, there's whatever you get from the live internet with like a connector to Bing, and then memory to me was just the part where you get the relevant private data to be part of that eventual prompt that gets you what you ask for. What do you think about thinking about it that way?
I think
Or
that's
is it inaccurate in any way?
No. I think that's completely right. What I have found is when I say, oh, instead of like, oh, memories is like a private place for your docs. Oh, you're building a search engine on top of your private docs, right? And that just seems to go a little bit easier down, folks. But like everything you said is spot on. That's exactly kind of the patterns that we're seeing customers build today.
Great, cool, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. And with that, I'm not seeing any other questions in chat. We have about a minute left. So if anyone does have any final questions, feel free to come off of mute. But if not, we just want to thank everyone for your time today to dive into all your questions and all these exciting announcements that we have coming up with Build.
Thanks, y'all.
Great. Thank
Cheers.
you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.